Okay, right. Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining this second seminar in the series Design Matters as part of our cost action. I'll go straight in and start sharing my screen so that we can enjoy the seminar talks. There are two speakers today. One of them's me. I promise in the new year you'll hear less of me, maybe, but that will depend on volunteers and me twisting people's arm to get involved. We do have a speaker other than me this morning, and I'll introduce Anna as we go along and her contribution. Okay, so here we go. Nearly Christmas time. This is my last day in the office, and I can't think of a nicer way to spend my last day than talking with you and presenting this seminar. I also have a whole bunch of administration to get rid of, but this is a nice way to start my day. So hello, welcome. Thank you very much for giving up some of your time and joining us today. I introduced this in the last seminar. This is the second, and I've borrowed this from a research program that I'm part of, which is Creative Fuse Northeast, and they have cake as part of that program. It's collaboration and knowledge exchange. So for me, this seminar series is a bit of cake, and I promised that I would bring along cake to this to enjoy during the seminar. But I failed because I ate it last night. But honestly, if ever you do want to bring along cake and eat it as you enjoy this seminar, please do. So the purpose of this seminar series is that it's a monthly meetup, predominantly for our cost action, but it is extending beyond that network, and I would encourage people to invite anybody who you think might be interested. So it's a monthly meetup, informal, to discuss ideas and present our content and research in this area. And predominantly, it's to promote our understanding of design-led approaches to social innovation and social entrepreneurship. And this seminar series really will take a community effort. So I will say this every time we meet up. Please do get in touch with me, volunteer to give a talk, share some of your work, some of your ideas, something interesting that you've come across. It doesn't need to be a 40-minute presentation. Any contribution you think that you could make and that you would be happy to make, please do get in touch. It'll make it richer and more interesting the more people who are sharing their ideas, their work and their research. What we will be doing over the course of the months is building a playlist on YouTube. So I'm recording all of the sessions so that for prosperity. No, so at any point you can go back and you can listen or revisit some of the content. But I think it will be a nice modest contribution to some of the work that we're doing here during this cost action. So today, it's scheduled for an hour and a half. I'm never quite sure how we managed to stick to time. I'm a notorious talker once I get going. We've got two things on today. I'm going to give a talk which is titled Conversations with Taxi Drivers, suitably obscure. It's really reflections on 13 years of developing a master's program focused on design-led approaches to social innovation and multidisciplinary innovation more broadly. Forgive me, Anna, I will pronounce your surname wrong. You can pronounce it correctly in due course, but Dr. Anna Wielicka-Regulska is going to also give a talk later today around public sector innovation labs and some of the research going on in one of the other work groups. Really looking forward to that. And at the end of the session, I'm going to close with an invitation. And I won't preempt that, but that's how we'll close out today. Throughout this, if you want to put questions into the chat window, I'll try to answer it during the session, or I'll answer any questions later on. Hopefully there'll be a bit of time for some discussion and some questions after each of the talks have concluded at the end of the session. So, conversations with taxi drivers. This, to be honest, hasn't happened a great deal this year because I haven't been in taxis that much. But there is always this thing when you're in a taxi and you're making small talk. You know, so what do you do? What do you do for a living? Okay, well, I'm a university lecturer. Oh, right, okay, that's interesting. What do you teach? I teach design and innovation. Oh, right, design of what? Buildings, fashion, posters, computer games? Not really. Business strategies? I design charities? Or briefs for other designers? Or communication pieces that help scientists secure funding? Or perhaps actually I design visions for how democracy might work? Or, actually, going anywhere nice for your holidays? So it can be quite difficult to explain what it is that I do and the work of my colleagues and my team at Northumbria University. But I'm going to have a go over the next 30 to 40 minutes to explain it and to describe how it's changed. How it's changed over the last decade and a bit as we've evolved our understanding and our practices, and also how the outside world has changed as well. So it began with these renowned fellows in the UK. Gordon Brown, who later became Prime Minister but was Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time in 2005, called for a review of how we would drive the economy in the UK and how we would utilise the creative energy of UK PLC to drive the economy, and Sir George Cox was commissioned, and in short order he produced a report. It was the Cox Review of Creativity in Business, 2005. One of the statements from that: we need business people who understand creativity, who know when and how to use specialists, and who can manage innovation. We also need creative specialists who understand the environment which their talents will be used and who can talk the same language as their clients and business colleagues. And we need engineers and technologists who understand the design process and can talk the language of business. That became a real seminal shift in the UK, and at the same time in 2005 there was also a multidisciplinary design network that was exploring changes within the design landscape and how that might influence both professional practice and education. And what Sir Cox suggested was what became known as, and the IDEO popularised as, the tenets of innovation. This kind of sweet spot where feasibility, technical feasibility, so that engineering technical perspective, that business perspective of viability, and the design perspective of desirability intersects and meets. And the idea was that how do we bring these disciplinary perspectives together to enhance innovation, to grow the economy, to stimulate social change, and to drive growth? Actually, for me, Innovation isn't really in that place in the middle that the Venn diagram suggests. For me, actually, innovation is where the nature of those circles change shape and expand. But we could debate that. But the premise was about bringing these disciplinary perspectives together and essentially creating what was termed then T-shaped professionals. And these were professionals that had a very deep understanding of their own disciplinary expertise, but had the breadth to collaborate effectively with other disciplines together. And this is where we saw that shift and a range of terms being developed around multidisciplinary practice, interdisciplinary practice, transdisciplinary practice, and the kind of the subtleties between those and the differences. But in the UK, there was this kind of the shift that started around the Cox Report. There was this ongoing body of work that the Design Council was leading around the shifting nature of design and multidisciplinary design practice. And there was a challenge to education to think about how we train T-shaped professionals, how we coordinate and construct research or educational programs or knowledge exchange programs that facilitate the ambition of this multidisciplinary innovation perspective. And at Northumbria, our response was a master's program called Multidisciplinary Design Innovation. And when it was launched in 2008, it was very much about trying to recruit designers, business people, typically marketing, engineers, to work together on problems that were being brought to us by the SME community in the northeast of England, and also some of the multinationals that we had established relationships with. So what did that program look like? Structurally, it looked a bit like this. All of our programs were 1-year masters, and the way that they were coordinated were through 3 semesters. Pretty typical structure in the UK. In the UK, you typically find a 1-year or a 2-year masters. Ours at Northumbria and in the design school were 1 year, and they had this structure. And the first 2 semesters originally were pass-fail. And that was to encourage experimentation and to help create this multidisciplinary creative community that wasn't afraid to fail, and that was built on a premise of experimentation and how we would reward experimentation. And we had these large sets of project modules that were running. One was about familiarization, getting to know each other, getting to know how to work, learning how to engage with external communities and organizations. Then really it was about trying to experiment in those approaches and methods, and perhaps projects that were a little bit more challenging. And then ultimately in the 3rd semester, a way of integrating all of that knowledge around one central project and a design thinking thesis to explore the key knowledge that the students were deriving. But there were some other supporting elements to this. As you'll see there, understanding the business context, the design context, the engineering context, and developing the self. The developing the self strand to the program was critical. You know, this is about trying to understand how professionals develop and change, how multidisciplinary teams work together and the tensions that emerge and how they're addressed. So there was a whole kind of supportive HR professional development strand that ran through the curriculum. And this was a real spine to the program. The other components there were really about trying to help students that didn't have a business or an engineering or technology background to understand those contexts and understand what they meant in relationship to innovation. So this was the structure of the program that we initially had. And actually, it was largely around integrating design thinking amongst a multidisciplinary cohort of postgraduate students. And that was about trying to understand ways of working that were essentially optimistic, so that the glass was half full. Optimistic in the sense that no matter what the challenge was, there could be, if creativity was applied appropriately and their disciplinary expertise was leveraged, there could be appropriate responses. Solutions at the time, we would call them. We were engaging with problems brought to us by external organizations and into this fundamentally optimistic space where we believed that with appropriate engagement, we could come up with mature and reasonable responses, solutions to those problems. And that was based around really trying to empathize. So building a connection to the ultimate end users, or the people who were fundamentally influenced by that business offering, that value proposition, that social service, whatever it might be, but really trying to get under the skin of the people who are on the front line or who are going to be the ultimate end users of the value proposition that was being brought to bear. And that was about bringing the sensitivities of those different disciplines together while undertaking original primary research to generate insights. So not necessarily to generate a thorough, rigorous understanding of market or of the people or of the ecosystem, but to do little bits of that to try to generate insights. And insights that would stimulate new thinking and new ways of understanding that challenge that was being brought to us. So it was very much based on a premise of trying to come up with new ideas, thinking about what the future could be like for those organizations and those end users or service users, and prototyping that thinking. Lo-fi prototypes using cardboard or string or maps so that we could explore and bring those ideas to life in a way that would allow other people to engage with them and have the creative confidence to explore them further. And that's largely what the program was about at this stage in the way that we were working. So the relationship that we had with outside organizations was quite transactional. It was a sort of a consultancy type model. We weren't a consultancy, we were a university master's program, but we would engage with organizations like Unilever and their science community who would offer us challenges. So in this particular instance, they had an interesting formulation around hard surface cleaners, the sort of thing you spray on your table or your work surfaces. And they had some interesting formulations around that. And they were interested to know whether those formulations would lead to new value offers and new consumer behaviors, and how all of that might manifest. And our job was to translate that inquiry into meaningful visions of what that future might look like. So if that interesting formulation was embodied in new forms of products, how might consumers change their behaviors? And we would develop those narratives and bring them to life. So we were very much taking a problem from an external organization, working independently, developing designed responses or solutions, and delivering them back to them and having a debate about that. And at this point, between 2008 and 13, it was that sort of transactional relationship with organizations. Another example of projects at that time, this is Mars Foods, and hence the picture of the Twix, and a consultancy called Meta. And actually, this was an investigation to look at how would the brand Twix evolve and change and offer new treat experiences, new confectionery experiences for emerging markets. So in this particular project, we were looking at particular markets in India, and particular lifestyle brackets within India, and how the Twix brand might translate into new confectionery offers relevant for those emerging markets. So again, it was about trying to address a challenge that an external organization brought to us by bringing together the sensitivities of design, technology, and business, while investigating a community of interest, which in this case were members of the public in India, a variety of different lifestyle brackets, and generate interesting, stimulating proposals of what the future offer might be for Twix as relevant to the organization Mars and the design consultancy Meta. So they were the sorts of projects we were working on. And so the drivers at the time, it was the Cox report, as I mentioned. It was this multidisciplinary design network, and it was theory around design thinking and the emergence of that. The academic, so they were the external drivers. The academic drivers was about how do we construct authentic, multidisciplinary design innovation education? How do we make it meaningful and real? How do we make the most of theoretical learning and practical experience? And how do we engage different disciplines together so that we shift from monodisciplinary working and a waterfall model of innovation and project management to more integrated multidisciplinary practice? And some of the critique of that was that actually we really didn't engage with technology futures in a meaningful way that wasn't really stimulated by our academic colleagues in the engineering department. And actually the pass-fail system, although it did give permission for people to be a bit braver, it also led to certain students exploiting that and kind of coasting for 2/3 of the program. And actually, our relationships with those organizations weren't as meaningful as they might have been, because of that transactional nature and that independence of working. We weren't really working together to address that problem. But what we did learn about was innovation, environments for innovation, and how to construct safe environments. And that safe environments, not really from the point of view of health and safety, but really, both physical, intellectual, relational, safe environments where people can work together to explore the unknown in a way where failure is celebrated as part of ongoing experimentation and redesign. And some of my colleagues wrote about that in 2010, and you can access that paper and read the detail in there. So in that period of time, other things were happening. The UK government developed a new innovation and research strategy, and also the Design Council continued to mature its thinking about design and its relationship to professional practice more broadly. And when we reviewed the external drivers at the time, there were three trends that emerged. One was that design supports economic growth and social improvement through two distinct and discrete roles. So one was a facilitatory leadership role, where it was about coordinating multidisciplinary groups and how you use design to integrate and glue together those groups. And another role was about designers as executing designed things and the crafting of things that have greater relevance to people and to society. One of the other trends was that there was a need for greater understanding about how design-led approaches support economic growth and social transformation. It was described that was the ambition, but there wasn't a great deal of knowledge about how that worked and how you embody it. And there was a lack of understanding about how what knowledge and practice would underpin diverse networks to leverage that creative and distributed intelligence. And they became some of the external drivers that forced us to redesign the program and shift our thinking. And we did that with the kind of the second version of the program. And in this way, some of those early contextual modules about the business context and the design context and the engineering context were transformed and integrated right across the program and made accessible to all students, as opposed to the situation in the first round where students would only take the modules where they didn't have that expertise from their undergraduate or professional experience. So this is where all of the community was learning about these things together, and where those knowledge strands of how do we develop ourselves and our community, how do we enhance our planning and professionalism, how do we better understand science and technology futures and their influence on innovation, and what are the methods and tools for stimulating practice and communicating innovation. Those knowledge strands were really embedded within the innovation projects that our students were doing. And at this stage, the whole program was assessed, and there was no pass-fail. And actually, it was also a shift in our own kind of intellectual thinking as well. So it shifted from design thinking to design-led innovation. And it shifted from a consultancy and transactional relationship with external organizations to one where we were really trying to co-create together. And we were setting up projects where we were working together with stakeholders and employees and citizen groups to design those responses together. There was still that core academic team, students and academics, that represented not only those original disciplines of engineering and business and design, but any disciplinary background. We were really recruiting psychologists, fine arts students, social scientists, people with expertise of applied computing or mechanical engineering, whole range of different design and business disciplines. We were really an open community at this stage, and that made a huge difference. But it was still about harvesting insights by working together with that community and that complex situation that we were interested in, to develop rapidly ideas and to prototype them with that community, so that those ideas were really stimulating the thinking of that intelligence base to then develop better ideas for what we might do. And all of this was on the premise of, what is the strategic value, that hence the chess pieces at the end, what is the strategic value of this work? What does it offer to society? And through this process, we discovered that this work was generating value of three different kinds. We were co-creating strategy with these communities, plans and targets for preferred futures. We were also developing assets, designed ideas and proposals for preferred futures. And those assets were used as strategic tools to leverage change as part of the strategy. And we were also creating creative functionality. So we were creating some of the processes and structures within organizations to enhance their own creative capabilities, so that they could continue a design process and an exploration of preferred futures independent of this academic community. So there were three types of strategic value that we were producing at this stage, and our practice was much more co-creative and integrated with our stakeholders aligned to projects. So some examples of that was designing youth justice systems with members of the Newcastle Youth Offending Team, and using all that we'd learned about the tools and the methods of integrating multiple disciplines to be optimistic and to really understand the challenges and the needs of people, to design proposals and propositions for new services and systems. Another example of a project at that time was working with Northumbrian Water Group, and their issue was that the behaviours of people causes untold damage to the sewerage systems, and that's because of what people put down the toilet and what they pour down the sink, and actually, you know, only paper pee and poo was one of their strap lines actually. That, you know, the only thing that should be going down the toilet is paper pee and poo. And the challenge to us was how do we understand people better so that we can influence their behaviors and perhaps start to cause change whereby some of the damaging materials that are put into the sewage system aren't. So we had to think about what sorts of awareness campaigns, what products, what communications, what engineering solutions could be developed that would actually start to influence this space and protect the sewerage system and influence consumers' behaviors. And again, you know, that was largely about running a kind of a lengthy project with our academic community of diverse academics and students, but also having discrete design sprints, intensive creative programs with consumers, members of the public, and with members of Northumbrian Water Group. Another example was trying to design careers education with the Gatsby Charitable Foundation in the context of a Northeast pilot, and working very closely with a series of schools, and actually trying to design those interventions with businesses, with schools, with pupils, to better understand what careers education could and should look like for it to be meaningful for all and every pupil, and for the organisations, the employers in the region, and our schools. And actually, you know, all of this was about how do we develop a co-created strategy? How do we construct and design assets for strategic change? So how do we materialize the ideas and propositions of preferred futures so that they can support a strategic change program? And how do we construct new practices and processes and infrastructures that will support ongoing creative action of those professionals in that space when the design team isn't involved? And, you know, and they were the three kind of strategic offerings that we were learning about how to create and offer to the world. And it was never perfect, you know, and at this period, there are critiques of what we were doing and weaknesses in the way that the program was organized. And the major criticism is that we'd become a one-stop shop for anybody who wanted bright ideas. We were almost losing our academic identity because we were never saying no. We were like, you know, somebody would come along with an interesting project, and we'd go, yeah, sure, of course we will work with you and we will engage. And at this point, we were really trying to think about how we would address some of those weaknesses and enhance the program and our academic community so that we could continue to drive our knowledge base and the way that we work with the outside world for both economic growth and positive social transformation. And a model emerged around integrated academic practice. So this is where, you know, we are driven by projects. We're from in a design school, that's nothing new to us. We are constantly driven by projects, and that's the way we have taught for decades. But this integrated academic practice allows us to construct project architectures that brings together research agendas and researchers, the academic agendas and the learning programs of students and the learning energy of students, and also the engagement agenda and knowledge exchange agenda around engaging with external organizations and communities and partners. And that we were thinking about not really how do we construct an educational program, not really how do we research this topic, not really what knowledge do we want to disseminate to different communities. We were thinking about how do we create project architectures that allow us to integrate all of those things at the same time. And this is what the model of integrated academic practice was all about. We also wrote about those three different forms of value, innovation value, in a paper here that you can read about. I'm going to start rattling through some of this, otherwise I'll be eating into Anna's time. The next set of drivers really was about emerging trends of social change, responsible innovation, design for policy, and they were some of the external factors that were influencing us. And what we did at this point that was a fairly novel innovation, certainly for us and within our institution, was we embedded research questions within the learning program. So we were really seeing, these are the research questions that as a community we will engage with and seek to address during this teaching program, but as a community of practice. And that was really different. And we built a structure whereby students would learn how to practice a design-led approach to innovation, how they would then craft that as a strategic piece of work and develop innovation pathways for more long-term change, and how you underpin that with principles of responsibility. And that was the kind of the intellectual journey of the program. So, the shift at this point was really to one of responsible design-led innovation practice. And our relationship with organizations shifted as well. So while it was about working with and designing with discrete communities, it was also about trying to extract knowledge about the themes that were relevant to that group so that it could be folded back in to other communities, and so that we could better understand the issues at hand. And these are some of the research questions that we were looking at. Does networked responsible innovation practice enhance resilience by leading strategic organizational transformation? And is this an effective and democratic methodology? So quite a difficult question, but this was one of the things that we as an academic team were interested in. The projects continued to be interesting. Designing the future of money with the Bank of England, designing cyber well-being with Northumbria Police. There's a range of projects, and typically within a year we would be running 6 to 9 of these projects, quite rapid interventions. So the drivers, external and internal, continue to shift. And at this point, we were really trying to create an identity for ourselves and take on projects that would allow us to develop as a community and have enhanced impact on the social groups and commercial groups we were working with. And this entire journey of these 3 stages is written up in this publication, and you can read about that in detail should you wish. And I'm going to shift really quickly now to the conclusion, and that's about where we're at now and where we're going, and shifting from that perspective of responsible design-led innovation practice to one where we're really interested in how we create arenas for meta design. So long-term, ongoing design practices, both out in the community and stimulated by other professional interventions, but underpinned by an understanding of complex creative compromise as a way of navigating social transformation. And our programs now are thinking about how we integrate transdisciplinary practices to create those arenas for long-term change, and what knowledge and practices underpin that, and which complexities entangle us as we try to do it. I'm leaving this slide up so that you can review the video at a later date and read these statements. I'm often asked a frequent set of questions, and here are some of those questions and some of the answers. The studio has always been such an important place for us, and working together physically, and we've not been able to do that this year, but actually we've found techniques and mechanisms for creating digital studios and digital environments that I think replicate some of what we do in physical spaces as well, which underpin our practices. So thank you very much for listening to that whistle-stop tour of 13 years of exploring multidisciplinary innovation practice for social change. I'd now really like to welcome Anna to give her talk. So Anna, are you there?
Okay.
Hold on, let me
Yes,
stop sharing my screen and pass back to you. Hi Anna.
Hi everybody. My talk will be more technical because I represent both groups. So working group 1 and working group 3. So I hope to be a kind of bridge between those two groups, and I see the cost action as one project. So hopefully our initiatives could somehow integrate our working groups. So idea of my presentation is to show the concept of public sector innovation lab. And also, I would like to present research project, which is initiative of our working group 3 leader, Peter, me, and Paweł Krzyworzeka. And I would like to get a kind of feedback from you if you think this research project is interesting. What could be some obstacles and how to improve it. And of course, I really welcome all the comments, and also everybody who would like to join and do this kind of research in his or her country. So let's start the presentation, I hope. Okay. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, fine. So let's go. I briefly introduced the agenda, so we will talk a little bit at the beginning about the concept. I will introduce to some extent myself, and later we will move to a questionnaire. I also define myself by projects, so I am participants and generally executor of consumer engagement labs. In Poland, there are co-creation labs with senior consumers. We try with seniors, with companies, try to come up with a new product, ideas or services for elder consumer. Generally, we concentrate on food, yes, because the project evolves around food. I'm also a member of cost action and other cost action hookers in Europe, and generally I deal here with some interferences between voluntary sector, state, and families generally, how the welfare is produced in this triangle. So it's also here. It's also a room for social innovation, which is quite important. How it is delivered in this triangle. I'm also a founder with my colleagues at the university, founder of Decision Lab. Here we use a very precise, I would say, instruments to check how people react, especially to new products. So we use eye trackers and EEG equipment, but it's relatively new project, so we didn't have a very long track record, but I think it will evolve. And I'm also a part of Erasmus project. We deal with clusters, and generally, the idea of the project is to transfer knowledge to Eastern European countries. And the last project is about the paradigm of evolution in social sciences. This is more perhaps theoretical initiatives. We try to check if the evolution could be a paradigm that links different social sciences. Okay. What is the idea of our project of the survey? Generally, we would like to do a survey on PSI labs, so public sector innovation labs. Why it is relevant, yes, for us, because when we look at public sector constitutes really a huge, say, amount of our GDP. In developed countries, it will be around 20-30 GDP. Some people they claim it's half of the economy. So it's a really big issue to improve yes, the efficiency of public sector. But we know from our experience, I work at the public university, probably the same pertains many of participants in our cost action, that the public sector is really, it's not especially effective, yes, and when we think public sector and innovation, it's something that's it's in a kind of opposition. In the same vein, we have very high rate of employment in public sector. So this is the sector which is also relevant in terms of employment. It will be about 30-20% of people that work in that sector. So even if the innovation and public sector, it's the terms that could one say they collide, we see that there is really no choice, yes, but to innovate, to enhance the value it is produced by public sector. But we also will notice, yes, that there is a growing complexity of the environment, and simple methods probably will not solve our complex social problems. In the same citizens, yes, they have higher expectation. They want to be a part of the change. So I think those two forces, they are the reasons why a special labs they emerge in environment, because we could, of course, consider public sector innovation that is in-house, yes, that it's made in-house inside the public sector. but I will refer to it later. It's very hard to public sector organization to introduce innovation by themselves. Yes, this is quite hard, not only for public sector, but generally to every organization when innovation is disruptive. Yes, when it destroyed the value network, when it destroys operations and some structures, yes, in any organization. So I think it's a main problem why so many. The main reason why so many organizations they outsource the innovation activity and they build external organizations, or they create organization that nurtures innovation outside the parent organization, let's say. So here we came up with the definition of public sector innovation lab, which will be to some extent at least independent organization to public sector organizations. So it's a physical or virtual sustainable environment that brings together relevant stakeholders and aims to create value for the community, sometimes through an innovative public sector by rapidly, efficiently, transparently coming up with experimentally proven ideas for social challenges. That definition is a little bit long. Here we extracted some features, yes, that are typical to public sector innovation labs. We define them as permanent. This is quite important when we will look for this kind of entities, this kind of organization. We not look for, let's say, projects that are temporal. This kind of labs will bring together relevant stakeholders. So we assume here participatory approach. So probably there will be a co-creation or co-production as a main way of working with stakeholders. Works rapidly, efficiently, transparently. What is also a difference could say, one could say, between the innovation that is developed in-house, so inside the public sector, and it comes up with proven solutions, ideas, very often by try and error, so in a experimentally with some experiments, but not sometimes, not always understood as purely scientific approach. It means more iterative, I think, more iterative way. And solves, of course, social challenges or meet needs important to some communities or to the society at large, and also guides policy makers, yes, in value creation for the society. As I said before, yes, the labs they emerge because I think that in-house innovation in public sector it's really poor, yes, and there are some forces that make, for example, bureaucracy, some administrative regulations, and ongoing work that makes this innovation really hard to happen in the public sector. So as assumption, yes, the labs offer better ways of generating new ideas, yes, and especially it is because, as some researchers claim, it's because they use design thinking practices. It's the main reason why those organizations are effective and are able to solve the complex problems. And of course, they also use this participatory approach, so they engaged stakeholders. The reason we would like to propose a quantitative way of measuring the activity of public sector innovation labs is because there are only, say, qualitative studies devoted to public sector innovation labs. There are some general reports, but not scientific. There are lots of case studies, some reviews, just to draw some conclusions. What's the idea? What are the differences between particular labs? And we have some ethnographic studies from insiders, usually from insiders. And there is no quantitative data. And I think that to some extent, to legitimize those organizations and to show how they really work and how perhaps they differ in their activities, it would be really helpful to offer more precise data. Yeah, so I'm not against qualitative data. Yes, absolutely no. They are really many times much better to inform our understanding of problems. But I think that this quantitative approach, it's something that will still help us to understand the particular differences and understand the problems, especially that are embedded in those kind of organizations. So the basic research question that appear in, I could say, nearly every paper is, are the labs more efficient than in-house public sector innovation? So theoretically, we can answer that probably yes, they are. They should be more efficient, yes, but they have their own, as I said, problems. So the knowledge transfer, yes, from this kind of labs to public sector, it's not always obvious. And it's usually it's claimed as a main barrier. There is also a case of financing. They some of the labs they are run independently, so they have to secure finances for their operations, and sometimes it could be a problem, especially when we have extreme situation as this year. We can expect that this kind of outbreak, coronavirus outbreak, will really suppress the activities of these labs. Especially those independent, yes, because they can be organized as government-led organization, but many of them, they are NGOs or even private-founded entities. So I think that this question will be not answered for next few years, but we would like to tackle less ambitious issues. So what kind of barriers does the public sector innovation lab encounter? What is distinct, yes, about the activities of these labs? What's the relationship between outputs, outcomes, and the impact of these organizations? And what's the influence of the governments and financing structures on lab activities? Impact and barriers they encounter, and what is very important, in my opinion, what are the regional differences between countries and parts of EU and countries outside the EU? And I think that the ultimate goal of this research will be to check what are those differences between countries, between East, West. This will be, I think, the most valuable part of the research, because we can, of course, check the situation in particular countries, but I think that the most valuable will be the comparison, how the Europe evolve, and try to explain those differences we observe between different parts of Europe. And the next thing, what is the scientific potential, and what are the limitations of this kind of studies? First of all, it's a topic which is I would not say a niche, yes, but it's not very popular. So in many countries, especially those Eastern and Central Europe countries, it could be that the person that will be involved in this research will be the first person in the country that will be linked with this topic, especially with this quantitative approach, as I said, which is not present yet. It's also a way of establishing new relationships, yes, because as you will see, in Poland we have about 25 labs. So doing this kind of research will allow you to contact with those entities and perhaps establish a long-lasting relationship. And I think it could be relevant, yes, when we, for example, in Poland, I think that there is really a great need of linking university research with practice. As Nick proved, it's perfectly possible, and it could bring amazing results. And we are at the, say, early stage in going out from academia to especially to public sector, even if we are inside it. And it will also create additional value for this cost action. I think if we could create a database of all public sector innovation lab, that would be great. Yes, it could be database, it could be an asset, it could be somehow promoted. You can build expertise based on it. So I think that these initiatives would be really valuable. You could do some research on that. You can show a map. So I think there are really lots of possibilities of utilizing this kind of data asset. What are limitations? I will talk in frame of a particular country. We will have a privilege of generating, say, census data, but we will usually come up with low number of cases. I said in Poland it will be 25 labs. I could expect that will not fulfill all the conditions. So the general base will be about 20 organizations, and from technical point, if you would like to check some correlations, so if there is a relation between, for example, size of the lab and the profile of activities or a source of funding, there will be really very hard to get to statistically relevant correlations. If the sample would be bigger, yes, let's say, I know 60, 80 cases, so labs, and it would be much easier, yes, to get this statistically significant correlations. But still, there will be a possibility of analyzing structure of answers. So it's and still it will be possible, yes, to compare the differences between countries, but it will demand the database that is nearly complete for Europe. Yes, if we would like to check the data on country level. So I just have to say that there are some limitations of this kind of studies. Of course, if you have, for example, France, Germany, and perhaps more developed countries in this sense, it's probably you will receive more cases. Yes, so you will have more cases of these labs. and it will be much easier to calculate correlations. If it's not, you know, the most important part in every analysis, but it's usually it's provide valuable information. What is the general method? Yes, because there were some attempts to generate a kind of databases of labs, but they were done based on literature, so based on scientific papers, and they were done mainly for classifications. Yes, and then you don't have to be consistent in terms of periods. So there were labs that lasted 1 year, 3 years, and they were included not in the same period. They were not operating in the same period, and they were included in the database. But still, all this kind of databases, they were run on secondary data. This time we would like to do internet search and to look for operating labs. Here we propose some terms, and of course there is our proposition. One always have to be creative and look for some peculiarities, and one have to be careful. So, but living lab, social lab, urban living lab, transition arena, sustainability, transition lab, policy lab, innovation labs, this kind of terms, city lab, public lab, and this kind of terms appear to be relevant, especially in terms of studies based on literature. So we use a very similar algorithm. And here we have, of course, to exclude those labs that are connected to medicine, so animal or labor. So this kind of terms we excluded. And here is our Polish database of public sector innovation labs. As you see, it's a print screen, so perhaps I will go to the for a while, if it's possible. Okay, but perhaps I will not interrupt the presentation. But what we noticed, there is 2 big urban labs and at least few entities that are let's say medium size organization, and there is lots of organizations that are quite small, so they employ few people. They are usually foundations. Those bigger entities, they have connection to government structures. And as I said before, perhaps when we will do screening, yes, so checking if they fulfill all the selection criteria, probably it could appear that considerable number of organization will have to be excluded. So from this list, I can expect that about 20 labs will undergo the screening. Okay, so in the next part, I would like to present you a questionnaire, and I don't know if we are ready to go through to go through it question by question. Yes, because we met before, and we realized that some parts have to be improved. But I will show you at least the structure and the way we are trying to extract data. And I think it will give you idea what kind of information we are looking for, and what kind of approach we have. I don't know if everything is clear, or do you have some questions? Or
Anna, this is absolutely fascinating. Thank you. There are lots of questions. I know that Bridget's fired about 5 into the chat. I'm also conscious of the time and drawing this to a close in 5 or so minutes. So is there something final you'd like to share or show of us, and then take a question or two?
Okay, so I will show for a while the questionnaire, yes, because it could be just to give a sense of what we are going to do, and we have a particular area which is, I think it's let's say, a weak point. I think about creativity, which is really very crucial to this questionnaire. So really would like to receive feedback, but perhaps in one-to-one communication, if you don't mind. Okay, so let's see if I can find it. So lots of. Okay, I will share my screen, and that probably will be the easiest way. Okay, can you see the questionnaire?
Yes, we can.
Okay, it's as I said, it's still a draft, yes, because and I think that we have to test it. We have to send it to expert, and later to even want to in-depth interviews to check if those questions are relevant to those labs. So we generally will base it, so the contribution of labs and their evaluation we will base on policy circle, and those 6 steps, and as screening we would like to ask people, yes, representatives of those labs, if they contributed to at least one of those 6 areas in year 2020. But I also received the feedback from my friend here at the university that this year, as I said before, it could be very tough for these entities. So perhaps we should widen, we should stretch the time span and ask about 2020 and 2019, just to have better understanding. And of course, we will ask some say formal questions. Here we have characteristics, so we would like to check how what is the governance, how they are financed, what's the scope or and size of these organizations. So how many employers, subcontractors, how it is led. Is it government organization or not? What's the level of authorities? What are the main areas of the activity of the labs? Here we will for sure add also SDGs. So we would like to check in what areas of SDGs they work. And still the area of influence, yes, so is it regional, national? Okay, and this is a source of financing. And here we have yes, activities. So we will come back to this policy circle and ask what areas is especially important. Here we will ask about the sources of information. I think that we will have to improve it, but there are some general ideas.
Anna, hi. When do you hope that you can kind of share the questionnaire with COS participants?
You think about the ultimate, yes, version.
Yeah, or well, either as a draft because you want input, or the final version. What's your timeline look like?
I think that if we will, I think that we will have to do it parallelly. So we will ask experts, do in-depth interviews, and we could have some feedback. But I think that we could be ready in the beginning of January or in the middle of January.
It's fantastic. Thank you. So I'm going to let's sort of draw this together now. Is there one question for Anna? That was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for pulling that together and delivering it for us. Does anybody on the call want to ask Anna a question? There's a whole bunch of questions in the chat, so we can probably take that when the call closes. So if I just
try to answer a few of them, but
yes, I've seen that. That's great. If I just grab control, wrong.
Okay. Should I leave the presenting mode?
Okay. Yeah, I think I can just. I just want to get down to the end, and
you can take back control.
I can indeed. Okay. Hopefully, I've got control, and you can see me now. Brilliant. Thank you, Anna, so much for that contribution. It's absolutely brilliant. If anybody else feels brave enough to come and talk at one of the seminar sessions, please get in touch. I'd be absolutely delighted. I'll be reaching out to a few of you anyway, because you're on my list. One of the things that Work Group 1 is going to do is, in the new year, we're hoping to get some participants. We're hoping to work with different institutions to think about how we could help you enhance the design approach within your interventions for social innovation or social change. I've run a series of programs over the last few years that have been based around kind of creative workshops where we've designed change programs, both educational and within organizational contexts. So I'm really interested, and I'll be putting a call out to the network in the new year for people to volunteer to be participants and come and try to redesign an initiative that will seek to embed design within their own disciplinary, institutional, national contexts. And we can think about what particular design tools and methods and approaches are most applicable to your situation and that will enhance your ability to deliver social innovation, or at least explore that creatively. So if you are interested in this, and I'll be writing it up and sending out a kind of a call in the new year, but do get in touch. I think there's going to be spaces for about working with 6 different institutions and giving them some bespoke one-to-one interventions where they can work creatively with me and a team from Work Group 1 to co-create their own design-led multidisciplinary intervention. So I just wanted to say thank you all for attending. Have a great Christmas. I hope you get a break. We'll be running the seminar again at the end of January. The next one's scheduled for the 22nd of January. And I'll be seeking to arrange for speakers in the new year. It's been lovely to see some of you and hear some of you. Thanks, Anna, once again. And I'll see you all next time.
Okay, thank you. Merry Christmas, Nick.
Merry Christmas. I'm just ending the recording.
Okay, thank you for giving me a floor. Yes, because a topic is perhaps not so. It could be hard to understand. Yes, so